Hello everyone, Edain here, and welcome back to the Edain Mod. Today is a video that you have all voted for in the recent poll, and I am here to deliver. So, this is my reasons for why I prefer to play the Edain Mod over the Age of the Ring mod. I've got altogether 7 different reasons that I've compiled. I've spent a lot of time thinking about all of these and how I'm going to deliver them, because I can imagine a lot of people are going to find this a bit controversial. I do apologise if anyone feels like I'm offending either Age of the Ring or any other mod or anything in that regard. I'm just giving my personal opinion on what makes the Edain mod better for my enjoyment, because at the end of the day, if you're playing a game and you don't enjoy it, from my experience, you're not playing a game. You're basically doing something very different, and it's very toxic for you to try and do something that you don't enjoy. Anyway, let's begin. Number one reason, quite an obvious one. From the minute you start playing a game, you have these base layouts. That either you've got a castle start or a camp start, depending on the map, and it just gives you the opportunity to build up how you want. You're not limited to building 2 buildings straight off the bat because of the free build setup with builders. You can just throw everything into your base instantly, start doing stuff, and not feel like you're falling behind. Depending on resources, obviously, it can be different. You can build a few things, and then you start expanding outwards. I've always loved the castle and camp starts all the way back from BFME 1. It is my childhood game. I've always preferred this version of the game compared to the free build of BFME 2. It never really sat well with me. And since Edain brought this back, I've never wanted to go back to any other vanilla Battlefield Earth experience, because this is just the peak for me. Secondly, we have unique faction mechanics. Every faction in Edain has something that makes them totally different to every other faction and gives them so much replayability. For Enlargers, they have the library, where you then get Eristor, who you can pop into a building to make your faction stronger. But you have to keep going between each one at a time, building up slowly and methodically. That's Enlargers' thing. They go everything slow and steady. And they research a bunch of books, which then makes them, again, even stronger. Oh, pardon me. Some factions, like Gondor, don't really have as many unique mechanics. They're probably the most vanilla faction you've got. Their buildings get upgraded tier by tier. But then after that, if they get destroyed, you'd have to build again from tier to tier. But then they've also got things like the Signal Fire, which is such a unique mechanic, which no other faction has, which is also a very cheesable mechanic if you haven't seen any of my Gondor videos. And then also factions like Isengard, they start off quite slow. They've got a very limited roster, but in the late game, their roster really explodes, and they have really elite units. And Sauron, of course, for Mordor, is one of the most unique mechanics ever made in Battlefield Earth modding history. You have to complete these objectives to level him up to make your faction stronger, because without Sauron, you're missing out on half your faction. There's just so much in these unique faction mechanics that I feel like Age of the Ring, if they tried to import them into their game, I feel like it wouldn't work just because of how their mod plays. It does make replayability less fun, because you're basically doing the same thing with every faction every time. You could say, oh, I'm going to go this unit instead, I'm going to go this unit instead. But I feel like if you limit yourself to what units you have in a game, you're just not going to enjoy it as much. Meanwhile, in Enlargers, you've got 4 avenues of research materials to go from. You've got your base upgrades in 2 different tiers. You've got your settlement upgrades in 1 tier that also upgrades your healing at tier 2. You've then got your military upgrades, again, all limited, all locked behind the library, and without it, you're, again, something that you're going to lose out on, because every faction in Edain should try and explore everything. It really wants you to explore every part of their factions, and that's what I love. I love a completionist system game, which is why I love playing with Mordor so much, because getting Sauron to level 10 is so... The intrinsic value of getting Sauron to level 10 is incredible, because it forces you to do these little things, but you can do them in any order, and it just makes, for me personally, it just makes playing the game is so much fun. Thirdly, I have suggested powers are one of the main reasons I like to enjoy Edain. Mostly because of how they restructured the power tree. I originally was skeptical when they showed me this, because I was like, what's going on here? What is going on? What's with this middle power all of a sudden? But over the years, I have really gravitated toward this style of powers. But it's not just because of the style of how it's been laid out, but the actual strength of the powers is they're strong enough that they can help you win the game. But they're not too strong that they're the reason why you win a game. That's what I feel like a lot. I mean, even when I was doing replays and casting video stuff for Age of the Ring, 90% of the battles I saw and casted were won because of a single power getting used. There was one time a Misty Mountains faction had a wereworm make a tunnel right behind the enemy's fortress, and then an army came out and destroyed their fortress. Another time, Gondor summoned eagles and destroyed an enemy fortress. There was the Balrog. It's just so many little different things that are just far too powerful. I mean, Dol Guldur has a faction as a faction are already strong. They got a power at tier 4 that was AoE, nearly instant kill, but it gets summoned instantly, so you have no way of countering it. And it really annoyed me, that fact. That it's just an instant cast ability, an instant cast power that the other players can have no reaction to. As soon as it's cast, they're like, oh, well, there goes my army, I'm dead. There's literally no counterplay to that. Compare that to Army of the Dead for Gondor. You've got to wait about 10 seconds before the entire army actually spawns. That is 10 seconds of reactionary time that a player could go, oh, I now need to get protection of the Bruinen, for example, as in Largest, because that is a power that can counter the Army of the Dead. In an Army of the Dead just marching towards you, you just throw down, for example, Journey to Valinor. You use protection of the Bruinen on it. It creates a bunch of elemental damage water horses that kills the Army of the Dead. And that way you've found a counter. Not every time, not every faction has a counter, but there's some factions that can just perform a reaction that actually makes it so it works in your favour. You're not always forced to be like, oh, well, I'm just going to have to sit and watch this happen now, to grab my popcorn. You can actually fight back. You're not forced into submission from seeing this awe-inspiring power. Even powers like Training of the Firstborn, it requires a lot of setup to make this power work, because you need to get it early, because otherwise, as you can see here, I've already gotten my units fully upgraded, and then that power becomes useless. But if I was playing in a different way, where I got fast powers, but I didn't spend time getting upgrades instead of focusing on getting more heroes, I can then make my entire army fully upgraded without spending or wasting any time on the upgrades. It's just these little things that I think make Edain's powers more proactive. You choose which ones are going to be best for you in that scenario. Do you need a hammer and anvil type unit that can help fight back against a wave of low tier infantry? Do you need a heal? Do you need a way of slowing down and weakening the enemy so you can get them into the right position at the right time and just slap them down? Or do you want a power that can protect your buildings and force the enemy into a standstill in that area? Or do you want a power that just is overall good, but not too good that it is oppressive? That, I think, is the main thing with the Edain powers compared to Age of the Ring powers. Edain powers are more balanced. Age of the Ring powers are just oppressive. That is my stand on the powers. Reason number 4, I think, is quite an obvious one, are the Ring Heroes. I don't think any game, any mod can ever compare to the way on how Ring Heroes for Edain have been produced. They're near perfect. They are right at the top. No mod can ever compare to these Ring Heroes. You get a nice bit of understanding on what each Ring Hero does, what they're capable of, before you even have to look at them. You get them almost instantly, but you do require an elite hero to get them. Gondor has several options, but obviously Gandalf is quite a high-cost hero. Boromir is a high-cost hero. Pardon me. Elrond is probably one of the hardest ring heroes to get, because you need to pay 4,000 for him, and he's not even in the main base. Although you will always have a library, as I've already mentioned before. But the Fellowship of the Ring is what you get as the ring hero for Imladris. For other factions, it's quite obviously the character that picks up the ring. Only other exception being Dane Ironfoot as Erebor, because then you get during the Deathless. During 7th even. Used to be during the Deathless. But yeah, every faction just has a unique ring hero that, yes, they can be powerful, but there are counters to them. Again, I feel like I'm coming back to the point of nothing is too strong that it cannot be countered. While compared that to the ring heroes for Age of the Ring, you've got Frodo/Bilbo for all the good factions, which, sure, that's not too powerful in itself, but a pretty large leadership buff that pretty much covers the entire screen and invents them. And then also getting another hero that can either clear the board because it's Gandalf, or heal because it's Sam, is not to be underestimated. And then obviously the evil ring heroes are perhaps a step too far in the again in the oppressive section instead of the balanced section. You've got Saruman, who got recently buffed to be made super powerful. I love his design, but I do understand that I know he is too powerful. And if I was to put Edain Mod Sauron and Age of the Ring Sauron up against each other, I have a feeling the Edain Mod Sauron would only win if he was level 10. The Age of the Ring Sauron is just ridiculously good. And that's the problem. If something is too strong, and also you have to consider his price. 10,000 for a ring hero. It feels like you're just getting the ring for extra points in, I don't know, just wanting to win. It doesn't sit well with me. The ring heroes of the BFME 1 the BFME 1, BFME 2 even didn't really sit well with me. But I think the ring heroes of Edain are just the perfect balance of a reward worth getting, or a reward that you need to consider changing your strategy, because some factions have ring heroes that actually give negatives to some units. Like, for example, Arvedui for Arnor. You have to consider going all heroes and elite units, because all your other units are just going to be reduced to nothingness because he doesn't care about them. And also, Gandalf the Grey, when he picks up the ring, isn't the best form of Gandalf, so you might consider instead getting Boromir the ring, because he then buffs your entire army, because that is an incredibly powerful ability to have. It all just depends upon what you want, because the ring hero isn't always a plus. You have to consider your options. You have to think through every single step. But if you get the ring hero, it's just a nice thing. Like, even for this, it doesn't start off at level 10. It doesn't start off all powerful. You have to build up their strength. And I think that's another thing. The Edain mod gives you something, and it makes you want to use it. It doesn't just give you something and then says, okay, yeah, just throw it at them, they'll die, and then GG kind of thing. I must say, obviously, Edain mod ring heroes are just so much fun, I think, is the main thing. They're so much fun to have, because it just gives you even more stuff to work with. And I feel like I've rambled on a bit too much about these heroes, but it has to be said, no one can compete to these ring heroes. Next, at number 5, we have the actual maps. Now, this one might seem a bit weird, because a lot of the maps of Edain are actually the same as Age of the Ring, because they came with Vanilla Battle 2. However, the main difference between how the maps are utilised in Edain is very different to Age of the Ring. Reason number 1, every map has a certain number of settlements and a certain number of outposts. Some more than others. Obviously, larger maps are likely to have more settlements and more outposts. But a large map like the Fords of Isen map, you can see every settlement is kind of built so you can have an equal amount on both sides of the map. Some maps are not like this. They just give you lots of different opportunities to change up how you play. Because if you can't get early settlements as certain factions, you're kind of screwed. Especially with a faction like Angmar, whose main thing is settlements. So if you're playing on a map like Forza Horizon, Edain Mod's going to be a good time because you've got lots of settlements. But some maps, say like the High Pass, where settlements are more scarce, harder to reach, and the map is actually quite large considering how far you have to go between each different segment, it makes it harder to play. But then compare Age of the Ring, the map is going to look pretty much the same, except there's going to be about one resource structure in all of this because of the way that the structures have to be laid out in Age of the Ring. And I think that's the main kind of thing I want to point out here, is the fact that you have to really expand outwards in Age of the Ring. You can't just stay in your bubble in a corner of the map because the game won't let you. And that's always annoyed me. That's why I've always preferred the Battle for Middle-earth 1 layout. Because I've always been a person that just likes to play defensive and just build a nice pretty base, have an amazing army, but not be worrying about being forced back into my base every now and again, because that was always a thing with me, and especially Age of the Ring, where the AI are super aggressive. They can just run into your base, destroy all your resource structures, but then you can't really fight back after that because you've got to make sure your builders are safe, and if your builders die, you've got to build new builders. Sorry, I've got some massive gas today. Apologies. But yeah, that's always been a thing with me. And in Edain, it does limit you, I will admit. This does limit you as well, but it's less oppressive. Again, I'm using this word repeatedly, because that is something that I've found a lot when I'm playing Age of the Ring, is you need to be worried about getting oppressed by how the mechanics in that mod play out. In Edain, there are things called comeback mechanics, and I'm going to go more into that later in my other points. But I feel like with the way maps are laid out, you've just got so many varied choices. And again, it's about replayability. That is my main reason for playing Edain and constantly making the skirmish videos for them. And I don't get bored of them because there's always something new. Not every map. Every map, you're going to see something new. Because every faction, some factions are always going to play the same way. But some factions, if they get an early outpost, it's a new story. If you've got, for example, you're playing on a certain map and a faction has an outpost right next to their base, for example, over here, and they build it. If it's for Lothlorien, for example, they've just doubled their military and resource production, meaning they're going to be a much more powerful threat for the entire game. But sometimes they don't even get one outpost and are stuck with like 2 settlements, so they're kind of screwed in their attempts of doing anything. Some factions always have these bonuses and minuses to every map they play on. Misty Mountains, for example, need a large open map to build all their extra buildings, their Goblin Town and Gundabad structures. If they can't build them, then they're limited to a 4-structure castle or a 3-structure camp. So it really is important for certain maps that they do that. Like for example, on Tol Morwen, if you're playing on Tol Morwen and you're goblins, you're so limited to the space you have, it really forces you to do a different play style that you may not have done on a different map. It just gives so many varied opportunities. But then in Age of the Ring, all your buildings can just be built anywhere. It's very, very similar in how all of those maps play out. And they always just throw endless units at you. The AI will always just throw endless units at you, no matter what you play on, no matter what you do. It's always going to be the same, and that I think is one of the biggest reasons why I've preferred Battle for Middle-earth 1 and Edain compared to Battle for Middle-earth 2 Vanilla and Age of the Ring, is just because of replayability, and this gives more replayability than any other mod. I was thinking of saving this one for last, but I'm going to actually do this now just so I can keep on this screen, because the last one actually requires me to come off this screen just to kind of make my point across. So, at number 6, we have resources and command points. And I think some people are going to find they prefer Age of the Ring's style of this, or Edain's, and there's going to be no middle ground on this. So, if you've played both mods, you'll notice that structures all make, well, resource structures at least, make a certain amount of resources each per tick. That's always been the same. In Edain, obviously, you can build any resource structures anywhere, and they'll always produce the same amount. In Age of the Ring, if you're 1% off on a certain area of influence, you lose resources. I mean, it's not always like 1% you lose one resource, but it's like every 10% you lose like 3 resources, which is big. But then also, some maps, as I've already mentioned in the last one, some maps you don't have that extra space, so you're limited again in structures. But you may think that's fine, but it really isn't, because there's another reason, and that is the command points. In Edain, in the past, we're going way back to version 4 when the mod was first released, you would have to get command points by selecting a structure and building a certain type of upgrade. You had 3 upgrades. You had resources, defenses, and command points. That was the only way you got command points. It started at 120, and then you got 240 for paying a 300/600 resource price for it. Which, sure, if you've got that building safe forever, that's absolutely fine. But thankfully, they scrapped that in 4.5 when they did the whole overhaul on the mod, and they made it so you could buy 200 resources permanently from your base for 500 each. This, I think, is one of the best things that have been ever done in any version of Battle for Middle-earth 2. Because in Battle for Middle-earth 2 Vanilla and going all the way into Age of the Ring now, every building has a command point increase that it gives. It's a small, like, little 25 resources, 25 command points, 50 command point intervals. But the problem is, the second you lose those buildings, you lose the command points. They're never coming back. You have to rebuild everything to keep your command points up. And I've never liked that system, because it constantly forces you into the mindset of, I need to keep building more buildings, when instead you could be focusing on research. You could be focusing on getting better units or heroes. But instead, you're focused on getting more command points, because if you don't, you can't build your entire army like your enemies can. And that thing has always struggled with me, especially in Age of the Ring, because as I mentioned again in the last one, Age of the Ring AI are incredibly oppressive. They will constantly be on your doorstep, reaching for resource structures to get destroyed. You lose money, and then you also lose command points, which means you can't field the army to fight back. And it's honestly, it has been that has triggered me for years. I've been quite quiet about it in the past. I've never really voiced about it because I've always tried to be focusing on the game itself. But it has always been one of the most hated reasons. I just hate it. I hate that is a mechanic that, unfortunately, you have to live with. Which is again why I've preferred Age of the Ring. No, don't prefer Age of the Ring. Sorry, I prefer the Edain mod. Because also, all your structures, they've made it so basically every resource structure can keep its permanent level 3 upgrade level if you build the certain upgrades for it. Again, that was done in 4.5. For it's not in Enlarged, obviously you don't have this, because you have your different research upgrades. But for every other faction, except for Mordor and Goblins as well, God, there's so many factions that have changed now. But you've got your Workers' Tools and your Settlers' Tools. And these tools are what make your buildings permanently leveled up. And it only costs 900 each. Which, you may think, okay, I spend 900, I get this permanent upgrade. Should I get it early? Should I get it late? It all depends upon, again, it's all up to you. You make the choice on when you want this. You get to make that choice. You're not forced into doing anything. You don't have to make your buildings level 3 at all. You could keep them tier 1 forever. But you have the choice to make them permanently leveled up so that you have a chance of coming back from a devastating loss. We've got only one building left. You rebuild everything, and then your resources start building up again. If that happens in Age of the Ring, you're screwed. You lose half your base, you're never going to recover unless the enemy is purposefully letting you live and try again, which in my experience, the AI are not merciful people. They're not merciful artificial intelligence. They want to kill you. That is their whole reason for playing in the game, is to destroy you. A person might be a bit more forgiving. If you're having a hard game, you're still learning, they might go easy on you. But in a way, I've been in that scenario, and I've hated it. I've hated it with my entire being just feeling like someone who has to be given having to have restraints on their enemy just so I can try and get good at the game. I don't like it. So that is why I preferred versus AI, and I keep away from PvP in general, just because this is the way I play the game. This is how I enjoy the game. A lot of people are going to feel like me on this. This is why I prefer to play even multiplayer PvE, because I prefer to play with my friends and enjoy the experience and not feel like I'm just being pressured into trying to win a game against someone else. I'd rather win with my friends than have to try and beat them down, because I don't like that kind. I don't believe in that kind of philosophy with playing with my friends. I'm sorry, I'm really struggling with this one, because this is probably the biggest controversial thing that I've ever tried to go through in my Battlefield Earth 2 experience, is just that command points and resources are the two cornerstones of your gameplay, and if you don't have either of them, then you've lost. And the enemy can so easily take that away from you in Age of the Ring, but in Edain, they're permanent. You can't get them taken away from you. You make the choice on when you want this certain upgrade. That upgrade is then permanent. You get to use it for the entire game without ever losing it again, just to like not being able to pay attention to what's going on. It's so important to me that these things are permanent upgrades. And I think if Age of the Ring were to make those upgrades, I would be tempted to play their mod again. This is the biggest reason why I stopped playing Age of the Ring in general and just focus on playing Edain, because this kind of playstyle is my preferred kind of playstyle. And lastly, we have difficulty modifiers. This one has always been difficult with Battlefield Earth in general, because the AI aren't that smart. At the end of the day, they aren't that smart. They just use what tools are at their disposal, and then they build up, they throw what they can at you, and they pretty much call it a day at that. If you beat them, you beat them. If you can't beat them, then they beat you. But that is kind of how all RTS style games have always been like. But I found that the way the AI are improved by their difficulties are far more managed in Edain than it is in Age of the Ring. I feel like in Age of the Ring, I mean, personally, I got so many comments on my videos saying, I struggle fighting peasant, I struggle fighting soldier, how are you able to beat Deathmark? I don't understand. Part of it comes down to experience. That is one of the biggest things. It just comes down to experience in that scenario. How do you know how to best the enemy? But going back to the last 2 points, maps and resources and command points, it all just comes down to managing them as well. But in Age of the Ring, they made it so the hardest AI gets half price on everything, and I mean everything. 4,000 cost hero costs 2,000. Their ring hero costs 5,000 if it's an evil faction, or like 600 if it's Frodo. But with the difficulty modifiers for Edain, the only thing they've really done is given them more command points, more powers, more resources. And I've actually mentioned this quite a few times at the end of a lot of my videos, that you notice at the very beginning of a game, the AI gets a slight spike in their resources at the very beginning of the game by about 1,000 or 2,000. And that little thing is enough for them to get ahead of you. And obviously the powers, they normally use their 2 tier 1 powers straight away out of the gate before they've even done anything, because they just passively gain powers. And I feel like this style of difficulty modifier is far more relaxed for players who are trying to learn the game. If you're trying to learn the game in Age of the Ring, you're just going to be constantly battered down. You're not going to stand a chance because every AI always builds the exact same base. They always throw out the exact same amount of units and use the same amount of powers. Well, maybe not all the powers, but the point still stands in that the only difference is how fast they do everything. And then compared to Edain, where you have, again, all the other factors coming in here actually make the difficulty modifiers a lot more noticeable, but not oppressive. And that is the biggest thing. As I've said, people have complained about not being able to beat the easiest difficulty, but there has been in the past just a lot of people complaining that the hardest difficulty is too easy. I mean, you guys have seen my videos. I've struggled against the brutal AI at times, even from just fighting one faction, because some factions have some unfortunate matchups. But in Age of the Ring, every faction has unfortunate matchups. But some factions are just stronger in general because their modifiers make them far too powerful to be stopped. And that has always been a hard thing for people to actually understand. But with Age of the Ring, as I've said in the past, it's very repetitive. You can actually learn by constantly just losing and trying again. But I understand a lot of people don't want to have to do that, especially if they're just learning the game. They want to be able to enjoy it instead of just being constantly harassed, having no chance to react or do anything. The Age of the Ring mod is definitely not a mod for beginners. I'm going to put it that way. This mod is definitely not for people who want to try and begin their Battle for Middle-earth experience from having no prior knowledge of the game in general. But I feel like the Edain mod has some similarities to that. It's not easy to get a first grasp on this mod just by looking at it, but you've also are able to just play slow and steady at your own pace. You don't even need to play against an AI. You can just start the game up by yourself. Just have a look at everything that the faction has, and then come in with an informed decision what you want to do, and do it. Because half the time, the game will let you do it. But in Age of the Ring, again, I'm just putting it out there, it's not easy. You don't get a lot of chance to do anything you want. You have to do everything a certain way against AI, otherwise you lose. It is just an unfortunate reality check. It is not a mod that you can do PvE and do whatever you want. You have to do things a certain way, otherwise you are screwed. And Edain is similar, but again, that's how I look at it, as how I view things. You might see things differently. The whole point of this video was just to give my give my opinion on what I wanted to explain why I think these things make Edain more enjoyable for me. You guys might, anyone watching this could be, say, love Age of the Ring and hate Edain Mod because they prefer everything that is about Age of the Ring and not Edain, basically the opposite of what I am. Which there are people like that. There's always going to be people that have always have one side of an opinion and have another side of an opinion. There's always going to be backlash and conflict in people like this because no one person is the same as another person. We're all individual people. And I'm going to stop the video here because I'm way off track on what I wanted to say. But yes, basically those are my 7 reasons for why I prefer to play the Edain mod over Age of the Ring. It's unique faction mechanics, maps and replayability, powers, ring heroes, the resources and command points, the base layouts, and the difficulty modifier. Hope you've all enjoyed, and I hope someone has learnt something from this. I think I'm going to go back to doing some normal skirmish battles for a bit after this video, just because doing these like ranking and quick tip videos have been good for me, but it's been about a month now, and I think it's time for me to go back and do at least another month of just skirmish battles to get back into the flow of things, and then we'll come back to the quick tips video. We're going to keep going back and forth on it. Hope you've all enjoyed. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.